Good evening and welcome to the webinar on the topic Introduction to Threat Vulnerability and Risk Assessment. In the next 60 minutes, I'm going to share with you a few concepts about TVRA. But before we get started, let me first like to thank achieversbank.sg for hosting this webinar. Achievers Bank is a learning platform dedicated to helping people build knowledge, competency, and there will be more webinars and courses in the upcoming months. So to look up for more courses from Achievers Bank. Okay, so to get started, let me share a little bit about myself. Now, I am currently the director and principal consultant and trainer with Security 4.0. I have close to 30 years of experience in the security industry, and I've worked in the Singapore Police Force, spent quite a number of years doing in-house security with several MNCs, and currently I am with Security 4.0. I am also with Security Industry Institute. Temasek Polytechnic has a young trainer and associate consultant where I provide security consultancy services, including security risk assessment and TVRA. And I also conduct training related to TVRA in the diploma courses, and I run workshops. Now, to find out more about me or to get connected with me, you can scan the QR code on the screen there. Now, this QR code will link you to the LinkedIn key. So let's move on. Okay, sorry. Okay, I think the slide should work now. Now, this is what I'm going to cover from now till 9 p.m. I will typically keep it to the 1 hour sessions. And this evening, we have got few key topics we want to cover. Firstly is what is risk. Let's cover some general concept about what is risk. Then I will deep dive into what is TVRA. And next, let's look at a few different TVRA models. So let's start off with what is the definition of risk. Now, there are many definitions of risk, but I think one of good definitions that we can refer to is, of course, none other than referring to the ISO. And ISO 31000 is a good reference. Now, what is ISO 31000? ISO 31000 is about risk management. And in the document, it defines risk as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. It's a very simple definition. What objective are we referring to? It could be your business objectives, it could be your security objective. In achieving your objective, there could be uncertainty. For example, running a business. When you want to run a business, there could be a lot of uncertainty. So, and it actually added on a few notes below there. Okay, note 1, I can say is it says is the deviation from the expected. Now, you want to run a business, of course, you want to make money, you want to ensure things are running smoothly. If you are running your security operations, you want the place to be well protected against loss, theft, right? That's your objective. But there could be chances that you will deviate from that, and that is a risk in simple terms. Now, risk can also be positive or negative. Now, most of us will hear risk as something that's negative, but it can be positive, no? Okay. And as a result of that, there could be opportunities, okay, and there could be threats. Of course, TVRA, the word threat, vulnerability, risk assessment, the word threat is focusing more on negative things. But I'll briefly talk a bit more about opportunities in the next few slides. Okay. Now, note 2 to entry. Objective can have different aspects of categories and can be applied at different levels. Now, risks are not just at the operational level. Quite often, we are talking about at the operation levels. What is the risk of intrusion, unauthorized entry, the risk of attacks? Now, those can be operational levels, but that can be also at different levels, like a tactical level or even strategic levels. So that is what it means. And there could be many different categories of risk. Now, note 3 to entry. Risk is usually expressed in terms of from 3.4 to 3.7. These are the few things which are closer to what we're going to cover today, the TVRA. In terms of resources, what are resources? Resources, and sometimes you may call it like hazards, safety hazard. Some people say safety hazard. What's the original source of the things? Like example, the original design of the place is open concept. Like if you're working in a hotel environment, it's open. So there is a resource because it's open concept. That's why there could be a lot of people walking into the place. You cannot lock down the place because it is meant to be this way. But if it's versus critical infrastructures, that may be different. So the resource could be very different. Okay, so risk, we will look at resources and then we look at potential events. Now, potential events could be threats, threat scenarios, what kind of things that can happen there. And then, of course, we talk about consequences. Whenever we talk about risk, we will talk about consequences. Now, consequences can be good, they can be bad, like what the note one talks about. They can be have a good returns, can have a negative. Of course, when we are focusing on TBIA, we are typically looking at the negative part of the things, and then likelihood. What are the chances of this happening? What are the chances that the event will happen? What are the chances that the impact will materialize? Okay, so this is the definition given on risk by ISO 31000. I think it's a good definition you can make with reference to. Of course, there are many other definitions. So let's move on to the next slide where I earlier on mentioned about opportunities, okay, and threats. Now, what are some examples of opportunities? Okay, of course, here we are talking about the context of security. I believe many of you here are working in the security industry. Okay, so opportunities are risks with positive effect. Now, opportunities usually it sounds more positive, right? It's good things that there's opportunity to for growth, opportunity to be more efficient in the operations, right? Now, in terms of our security operation, we want to be more efficient. Example, that is a positive effect. So, how do we find this positive effect? So we need to look for the opportunities. The opportunities could be in terms of example technologies. Now, these days, we all have been talking about AI, artificial intelligence, Gen AI. These are all opportunities. What can we do? What can we leverage on Gen AI to help us to be more productive, more efficient? But if you look at Gen AI, if you say yes, by using Gen AI, it helps us to do our job better. Okay, so there's a positive effect. But what is the risk? The risk could be it may affect human judgment. The officer may then become too over reliant on the system. The system doesn't trigger and they no longer respond. So that is one of the potential risks. Okay, so you can see how it works for opportunities. There can be positive effect, but there can be negative effect out of it. So threats are the more closer to what we're going to cover today. Okay, our focus is on TBRA. Risk is equal to threat times vulnerability times consequence. So the key factor that we're going to talk about is threats. Threats is things that is typically external. Threats of unauthorized entry. That's how I mentioned about unauthorized entry, or it could be terrorist threats. Now, so if the threats is to materialize, there will be negative effects. Example, loss. Okay, there could be injury. There could be negative impact to the organizations. Okay, so you can look at risk from both ends. Okay, and I do believe there is opportunity. It is possible to also look at opportunities if your organization so decide to do so. If not, then typically for TBIA, we will focus on threats. Now, of course, the cover page, the picture you saw early on, you saw a person climbing the Taipei 101. That the picture is really about the Alex Ono, who is the rock climber, a American rock climber who do a solo climb up the skyscraper without any safety harness. Some of you might have watched it. If you have not watched it, you can catch some of his actions in the YouTube. If not, then if you have the Netflix, you can watch the full. I think it's about 90 minutes of his climb. I managed to catch it, although it's not live. I watched the whole 90 minutes. It was very interesting to see a human climbing the high skyscraper up the skyscraper without any safety harness. I thought that is a very interesting uh, activity that he undertake. Okay, so I then decided that let's look at the risk. Why did he do it? What was the risk for him and the people around him, including his wife, his family, and the organizer, okay, or the sponsor, okay, who is supporting this event? So at the last training workshop that I did, I have a workshop on essentials of TBI, which I conduct at the Temasek Polytechnic. Earlier on, I was saying I do some training. Okay, so Temasek Polytechnic, I run a 2 days workshop for essentials of TBI. Just earlier this month, I did this activity with the participants. I asked them to score it. Okay, so what you see on the screen are the actual scoring scribbled by the participants. Okay, by Alex. Now let's use this concept risk equal to TBI to analyze what are the risks for Alex, okay, to climb Taipei 101. Now on the first column, you're going to see the T, the V, the I. Now sometimes we call it consequence, sometimes we call it impact. Let's discuss about it later on. I'll go into more detail about consequence and impact. Now let's look at threats first. Remember, we are contextualizing to a climb of Taipei 101. It's not a security risk assessment, but the concept applies here. So let's look at threats. What are threats? Now threats here, of course, we are looking at more on the external. Okay, just remember, it is threats usually refers to external. So in this case, it will be more like the environment, the weather, all this. Okay, then the vulnerability. Now vulnerability typically we refers to the internal. Okay, in this case, I will say specifically will refer to the climber himself. Okay, his vulnerability, whether his weaknesses, his skill set to climb the skyscraper, and then of course the impact here refers to what if he fall, right? If he climb the skyscraper, what if he fall? What is the impact? Okay. Now, then the next column, the second column is the inherent risk. The inherent risk means without doing anything that's additional, what is the risk of just climbing this skyscraper? And the last column on the right-hand side is what if risk control is being implemented, additional measures are put in place to reduce the risk, and what will be the score? So using the scale of 1 to 10, okay, 1 being the lowest risk and 10 being the highest risk, they did a scoring. Okay, now talking about these scales 1 to 10, you can always use 1 to 5, 1 to 3. The fact that we use 1 to 10 is we give them more options. Okay, so that is one of the key takeaway. You got a bigger scale, you got more options to choose. Okay, you got smaller skills, you got lesser option to choose. Like 1 to 3, you can only choose 3 skills, basically 1, 2, 3. But having 10, you have more options, then you will see more different risk level. Okay, so let's look at the first one, threats. Now you see 7-2 because actually I asked 2 different groups to do some scoring. Okay, so you can see one group actually score 7, one group score 8. Okay, then the other group score 2. You can see the vulnerability is actually quite low. The risk is quite low. That means they are looking at Alex as being skillful. That's why the vulnerability is very low. But the impact is pretty high. This would almost like translate to immediate death. You know, if you are up so high and then you drop down, that would mean fatality. So they score pretty high. So using the highest score, 8 times 2 times 10, that will give a score of 160. Now, after risk control is being implemented, the score actually reduced from 8 to 5, vulnerability no change, and then impact no change, and the score become 100. Okay, so this is the score. Now, this was done by them, and we have a discussion. But after discussion, as I prepare for this webinar, I did out a table of analysis on my own. Okay, let's take a look at this analysis. Okay. Now, this table shows you the similar to the earlier one, okay, but I actually put in some analysis to help us understand. Okay, so let's look at the first one, threat T. Now, early on, there was a score of 7 and 8. Oh, it should be 8. I think there's a typo here. Okay, I thought I changed it. Okay, so the score should be 8 because you will work out to 8 times 2, 16 times 10, 160. Okay, so the first one supposed to be 8. Okay, now let's look at the score for 8. What does it mean? Why did they derive 8? In fact, most scores score quite high, the 7 to 8. Okay, so these are the reasons which we can analyze. First, that's what I mentioned, external. Okay, unpredictable weather. Okay, now weather is nature. Nature is something quite difficult for us to control. So wind, as you climb higher, the wind is actually stronger. If you guys watch the videos, you will see the strong winds are actually make it more dangerous for him, and it's not something they can control. Okay, wind turbulence at high elevation, slippery surfaces from rain the day before. All right, he climbed on Sunday, but the day before it was raining, so some parts of the building probably is still wet, and there are some actually grease because over time grease will have built onto the surfaces of the building. Okay, in fact, this was what Alex actually shared as he was climbing up, and there could be distractions. As you watch the live telecast, you will see actually a lot of people in the building, okay, in the office was actually trying to wave to him, trying to say hello to him, trying to take whippy with him. Okay, I think those are really distractions, and while his life is really hanging outside, but people inside the building were trying to attract his attention. I think these are all possible distractions, and it's all external. Okay, it's like not within him, it's outside of him. There could be some environmental change. Even at the point he decided to climb, there's no rain, no wind, but halfway up in that 90 minutes, things can change. Okay, so this is threats, and that's why the score is pretty high for 7. Okay, now so what can be done? So you look at the next column, the risk control. Look at the risk control. Now in the risk control that is implemented, they do a weather monitoring. Okay, they as I was saying, on the Saturday they actually monitor that the rain was there, so they postpone it. Okay, and Alex actually did some practice climb. It's not like the first time he climbed up. He did some route reconnaissance. He studied the building, the structure. How is he going to overcome the various obstacles? In fact, there was an analysis that says he could have climbed the easier route up the building, but he chose the more difficult one. It's actually part of his plan. He wants to overcome the obstacles, and he thinks he can overcome it. Okay, and there's also a safety team monitoring the communications, the situation, and constantly communicating with him. He actually have this communication device with him. Now, assuming all these are been implemented, these risk control are implemented, there is a possibility that the score can be reduced. In this case, it's 5. The participants actually put a 5 there, which I think is quite reasonable. Now, could it be reduced to lower? It could, but it really depends on what is done. But environment is really quite difficult to control. Okay, so let's look at the next one, vulnerability. Now, vulnerability in this context refers to internal. That's what I say, external, internal. Internal will means Alex himself. Now, Alex is has a strong climbing skills. He has been climbing the mountains. Okay, and this is not the first time he's doing this free solo climbing. But for skyscraper, it's kind of like his first time. He's been doing a lot of mountains climbing, solo climbing. Okay, and he has climbed even higher than Taipei 101. Okay, so there was some form of experience before. Okay, and in terms of physical fitness and mental readiness is really very good. Okay, he's not afraid of height. He can climb very high, and there's little fear. Okay, so can something be done? Yes, I think they have done something. Alex have done something. In fact, he done a lot of things. He did a pre-climb training. He did a lot of intensive training. He do his equipment check and preparations. He got his support team to come in. He did his trial run. He did some practice runs, climb up also. Now, with all this risk control, the score is no change. Okay, this is what, of course, the participants gave the ratings. But I would add on my own personal opinion here. I feel that it is possible to reduce, okay, because if he never do all this preparation, he never do the reconnaissance properly, yes, his vulnerability may not change. But if he had done a lot, I would think maybe from 2 to 1. Okay, or maybe initially I might put a 3, then you reduce to 2. This is what I feel. Of course, what I show you are the scores given by the participants. Okay, now let's look at the third one, the impact consequence. Okay, um, okay, so you can see a better for if you fall from height, don't talk about at the height of it. Maybe at the third, fifth, sixth floor, 10th floor, there will be serious injury already. Okay, emergency response activations, reputation impact. Okay, legal. There's a lot of impact to it if you fall. So what risk control can be put in place? Okay, of course, they stand by all the emergency response, restricted zones. You can see they cordon off the area of buffer zone. The audience cannot stand right below them, right? This is in case for safety reason, what if we fall? Um, okay, so of course, because these are live telecast, right? Netflix actually did this as a live telecast. They actually put in extra measure. They put in a 10-second delay broadcast in case, because they really don't want to create that kind of psychological impact to the whole world. What if it really falls, something goes wrong, and then it's live telecast. So what they did was they put a 10 seconds delay, and hopefully if really something happens, this may prevent the whole thing being broadcast to the whole world. I thought these are some measures that may reduce the impact. Okay, so you can see score still didn't change, because I in a way I think I agree with this, because the impact is already so serious. The fact that if someone die, fatality, um, the fact you're going to reduce 10-second delay, that may have little effect on the impact. Okay, so let's say it keep it at 10. Now, so you look at the score from 160. Now you reduce down to 100. Okay, so from the point of view for Alex, he did reduce the risk. Okay, then probably yes, yeah, is a go ahead for him. Okay, now let's look at another one. Okay, this is another interesting risk assessment. I got the participants, another group, okay, who are just like many of us. We are not a professional climber, so I told them to do a similar risk assessment, and just look at the score. Remember just now I was showing 160 reduced to 100. Now here at a glance, you're seeing 900, 900. Okay, inherent risk. That means any one of us, we are going to climb this, the risk is 900. It can be reduced. Okay, let's look at the numbers. Okay, let's look at the numbers. Okay, so track 9. Okay, now actually the threats are quite similar. The environment that we are exposed to are the same. We are to climb that, actually we are exposed to the same threats. The wind, okay, the rain, all these, we are actually exposed to the same. Now, if we are going to do the same risk control measures, okay, here shows from 9 to 7, okay, it is possible to reduce. But you notice something different. Early on, I showed the scores are for Alex, and this one are slightly different. You may be wondering, how come different? Just now I was showing you, remember, was like 8 to 5. How come here 9 to 7? Have you wondered about that? Okay, if it is the same environment, now, rightly, the score should be the same. Okay, so in both cases, whether it's Alex or us, the threat score should be the same. We are exposed to the same threats. Rightly should be this way. Now, why is it different in this case? Okay, is because I got two different groups of people to work on it. So from this activity, you can see that different people will rate risk differently. And a lot of time, our risk scoring can be a bit subjective. Okay, but to me, as long as it is in the same region, the same range, I think it's still fine. Like in this case, like 9, earlier was 8. I think it's still fine. Okay, but if it's like now, the score is below 5, 2, 3, then Alex is 9, 10, something is wrong somewhere. So we have to then reconcile why is there a difference. Okay, now let's look at the vulnerability. This is where the real difference really comes. Now, earlier on, we saw for Alex, his vulnerability was very low, only at 2, because he's skillful. Now, if we are to climb, we have no skills at all. We are not professional. Even some of us are rock climber. Maybe we are not to that level. We have not climbed mountain like what he done. Have been doing it for so many years. He have the technical know-how. He got the skill set. He got the experience, and he got the physics to do it. Okay, and many of us don't have it. So therefore, our vulnerability is 10, very high risk if you're going to do it. So what kind of risk control can we put in place? Yes, we can have a supervision. We can someone give us guidance, can do equipment checks, safety briefing. There's so much we can do. Maybe we can reduce the risk by 1 or 2 points, and the score here is 8. Okay, so it's still very high because I think it's not easy for us to overnight or within a short period of time to be able to gain the kind of skills to climb the skyscraper. Now let's look at impact and consequence. Now the impact and consequence should be the same, because if you fall means you fall, you're dead, right? So basically you look at the impact consequence here is fatality, death, injuries, reputations, all the same. So even if you put in place the risk control, the similar risk control, the impact is still the same. Now here when I say the similar risk control, means they are still climbing solo without harness. But if we change, let's say we change the situation a bit, where the risk control includes the using of safety harness, then this may change. Okay, so example, the impact. Okay, I would think the impact will change significantly. Okay, instead of a score from 10, you probably will drop down to below 5. Okay, because if really something goes wrong, the safety harness is there to catch. Okay, but the whole event here is to climb without safety gear. It's a free solo climbing. Okay, so therefore the risk control of safety harness is not included here. Okay, so with this, you can see the score has reduced from 900 to 560. It is still very high. So for any one of us, I think the decision is no. It's too high a risk to climb. Okay, so now based on the same activity, the same risky activity of climbing Taipei 101, we can see from a different perspective, from different people, the risk can be very different. For Alex, the risk is considered quite low. Okay, and he can reduce it further. So for us, for most of us, our risks are very high. We can reduce it, but it's still very high. Now the question then is, okay, the question then is, after hearing all this analysis, will you climb Taipei 101? Right, so this is the question I asked the participants. Now obviously, none of them say they will want to climb Taipei 101, okay, because it is very risky. They don't want to risk their life to climb, to do something that may end their life. Okay, but of course, if for someone like Alex or maybe his peers who have a similar skills, maybe they will take up the challenge, with some motivations. Okay, in this case, of course, for Alex, it is something he wants to do. Okay, aside from the some reward he gets, we understand that he was rewarded with like $500,000, and after tax, he was saying he was only like 300 over $1,000. Okay, it's maybe not a lot to some people. In fact, some people are saying is a bit too little, okay, but there can be other indirect rewards. To me, there could be other indirect rewards for him. Example, there can be free, so-called free marketing for him. Okay, now he become more famous, then maybe there could be more sponsorship for him. Okay, there can be people who may want to interview him or may want him to become a spokesperson. Yeah, so I think those could be the indirect benefits he may get out of it. Okay, so that's a case study where I have actually applied the risk is equal to threat times vulnerability times impact. Okay, Now that will helps you to understand a bit about overall concept. Okay. Now let's look at the context, security context. So I will deep dive into more on the security context. Okay, understanding risk in security based on the ISO 31000. Earlier on, I give you definitions of risk using 31000. But the way you can actually just purchase a copy of the ISO 31000 guideline, it's called a standard guideline. Standard guideline because you don't need to strictly follow it. Is a guideline. Okay, so let's look at it. Effect of uncertainty on objectives, right? So how does it apply to security here? Okay, let's look at it on the left hand side first. Okay, so I was saying about objective. Okay, so what objective are we talking about? Now here I listed more on security context. Okay, but it can be your organization objective, no, to grow, to provide a business, to make it a fun place to work in, okay, a holiday destination. It can be the kind of objective, your business objective. But here, what I put in is more from the perspective of security, to protect assets, to protect the people, protect life and property, ensure the safety of the guests, the staff, okay, and ensure business continuity. So that can be objective. Now, in order to achieve this objective, there could be uncertainty. Uncertainty of what? There are a lot of factors, right? Okay, so that is where we talk about the risk, and I earlier on shared with you. There's two aspects. One is the threats, one is the opportunities. So let's look at the one at the bottom first, the opportunity, the green one. I gave you one examples like technologies. So these days there are a lot more technologies. Are you going to leverage on the technologies? Are you going to leverage on technologies to make your operations more efficient and effective? Okay. Also other areas like staff training, you can look at spending money to train your staff. Okay, so itself is a reason you train your people to be competent, to be skillful. Then the next moment they resign, they leave a company. Sometimes really that is something they say is a risk. When you train your officer, spend too much to invest in an officer, your officer and ended up leaving your company to join another competitor. Okay. Okay. So for threats, usually we are looking at external threats, terrorist threats to criminal threats. Examples are intrusion, vandalisms, protests, all this potential harm, injury, loss, damages, property loss. Okay, so these are some examples of how it can apply to the security. Now, from the bottom there, look at the sequence. Okay, now this explanation, this sequence really relates to 31,000. Okay, some of you probably are exploring what kind of model you want to use for your TVRA. I've been seeing a trend where companies are starting to use models related to 31,000. Later on, I'll show you one RA model that has make direct reference to 31,000. Okay, you can consider using that. Okay, now so for now, look at the conceptual level. Okay, so resources. Now in 31,000, you talk about resources. Resources, what I explained to you lah. What is the nature of the business, the inherent risk that you have lah. If you are operating in a hotel environment, then your resource is a open concept environment. Okay, high footfall area. That's your resource. If you are working in a high security place, critical infrastructures, your resource may not be there. Your resource maybe could be insider threats. Okay, you have insider there. Okay, so how do you address those sources? Okay, now based on these sources, what could be the potential events? Like an open concept place, anyone can come in. What it means could be unauthorized entry, people bring in explosive into the place and plant the bomb there. This could be the potential events, and that could lead to what could happen, the consequence, fatality, death, injury, losses. Okay, and then what is the likelihood? Now, to determine likelihood, that there are some factors you may want to consider. Later, I'll show you some considerations for each of these factors. Okay, so example, historical events, or this has it happened before or not? Okay, is a security measures there or not? If there are good measures, then that may reduce the likelihood. Okay, so at a very high level, this is how you can consider using 31,000 in the context of security, because 31,000 is not explicitly written for security. It is very generic. Okay, you can apply for any industry, but it can be applied for security context. Okay, so to narrow down, okay, I've been talking about 31,000. I talk about security risk assessment at a high level. Then let's drill down to TVRA. Okay, now TVRA stands for Threat Vulnerability Risk Assessment, and this is one definition I took from this document. At the bottom there, you see this Infrastructure Protection Act Guide for Responsible Person. Now, this document is the document written by the Singapore Police Force. It is actually meant for the critical infrastructures in Singapore, where under the law, certain buildings that have been identified have a higher risk. They have to undergo risk assessment, this security by design process. And the building owner there that take charge of this aspect, the security aspect, they have a person called responsible person. Okay, so this document is actually meant for that person. There's a link below there, or you can Google yourself. You will find a very resourceful document. Although it's meant for Singapore, but a lot of resources there you can apply it. Example, you talk about TVRA, some resources there that you can use for your other projects. So this definition is taken from there. It is it is saying that TBI is a systematic process. Systematic, that means a step by step lah. Okay, to identify and analyze risk associated with attacks, okay, against the identified critical assets. Okay, so later on I will share with you the 9-step model that that is actually used by some of the consultants here in Singapore. Okay, now although numerous methodologies have been developed, okay, the principles of conducting risk assessment are generally similar in nature. You will see many examples like PIMA 452, 426. Some of you may have heard about it. Okay, then of course there are other methods. Okay, but basically the principles are the same, which is what is saying here. Okay, essentially it's a formula. I will show you the formula. Okay, which is here. So it's not the hidden secret. Okay, I've been talking about it just now. Okay, it is a formula. Many of us know. Okay, so just now I was saying the consequence impact. Let me talk about this a bit. Just now I put consequence slash impact. So it can be used interchangeably. Actually, it's the same. Okay, but in some situations, some of you may want to differentiate it. So what exactly is the difference between consequence and impact? Okay, now when something happens, the immediate effect of it is the consequence. Like a bomb, if there's a bomb that goes off within a compound, the immediate consequence is there could be fatalities, there could be injuries, there could be damage to the property. That's the immediate consequence. Okay, now in the aftermath of the bomb explosion, what happens? That could be damages, right? So there could be losses. Okay, there could be reputation damage. Okay, business loss. So maybe share price drop. Okay, all these other impact. Okay, so the effect. Okay, the effect from the primary uh, events. Okay, so you can say the consequence is the primary effect. The impact is the secondary effect of it. Okay. Now, typically when you do the TBRA, risk is equal to threat and vulnerability and consequence. We just lump all the factors together. Okay. But understanding consequence and impact will help you to categorize it so that you can deep dive more. Okay. Once you ask yourself what is consequence, next you ask yourself, is there any impact to it or not? Is there a secondary effect? You may be able to find out more factors to help you to do a scoring, okay, for these factors. Okay. Okay, so this is another angle to another perspective to understand risk. Okay. Now you can look at threat as a preparation phase. Now, how easy is it for the adversary to get ready to attack the place? Okay. Now it's really external. That's what I was talking about external. So it's talking about the external people, the adversary, the criminal. How easy is it for them to attack? Okay. Now after they do the planning already, they arrive at the targets there already, right? Now, how easy is it then for them to carry out the attack? Okay. So example, they want to carry out a bomb attack. They go and get the explosive, all these things already, right? They have to travel down there, right? Okay. Now, once they reach there, the question is then how easy is it to carry out? Are there security officers there? Are there security measures there to prevent them from bringing in the IED into the compound to plant it there? If there is none, there's no access control, they can easily walk in, then the attack phase is very easy. Okay. Then, of course, the last one is the consequence. When the event really materialize, really happen, what will be the consequence? How serious will it be as a result of the attack? Okay, so this is another angle to look at this risk from TVRA. Okay, now just to deep dive a bit more. Okay, for each of these, just recapping. Okay, just recapping what I said earlier on. Threat is really talking about external harm potential. Now, in most of the cases, we talk about external. Of course, some of you will say, how about insider threat, right? So on this now, insider threat, yeah, can also be considered here. Okay, but in most cases, we are talking about external. Okay, because there can also be a scenario where external party collaborate with insider. Okay, now here's the definitions. The likelihood. So here we talk about when people say, hey, where is the likelihood actually? When we talk about the likelihood, is actually typically mentioned here, the threat likelihood. The likelihood that the threat will happen. The likelihood that the attack will happen. Okay. And threat focuses on the attacker, external conditions, not the asset itself, not in the internal. Okay. And one important idea to take note now, threat will exist regardless of how well protected the target is. Okay, the threat will be there. Just like give an example of Singapore. Singapore can have a good security measures, can have security officers patrolling, armed officers patrolling, can have a good measures. But threats still can exist. The terrorist is still there. The terrorists want to attack, no, they are still there one. Okay, despite the security measures are very good in Singapore. Okay, so these are some examples of consideration. This is to help you to understand how to use scoring. Earlier on, we did that activity, right, for the scoring for the climbing the Taipei 101, right? I given you that table, right? Right, that is for climbing. Now, for the context of security, if you are looking at threats, these are things you will ask ourselves. Is it easy to obtain the weapons, the explosive? Is it easy to carry out the attack or not? The capability? Are there incidents that has happened before? Because incidents happen before means there's an example reference for this terrorist. Okay, so there's a list of all these examples. Okay, let's look at vulnerability. Okay, let's look at vulnerability. Okay, vulnerability are referring to internal, as I mentioned, internal weakness. Okay, do you have a weakness? In this case, likely we're talking about the security weakness. In terms of security measures, how susceptible are the assets or activity is to the threat? Okay, if your assets, let's say your assets is data center, right? These days, data center are very important. Okay, is the data center or server room susceptible to the threat? What is a threat? We must ask ourselves, is there a threat first? The threat could be unauthorized entry into the data center to sabotage. Okay, how susceptible? Okay, then we will see what are the measures. Are there layers of protections or not? Many data center have got layers of protection. In order for the attacker to enter into the data center, data hall, he has to go through, example, 7-8 layers. Okay, there's an external fence, there is a screening, then there's a building perimeter control, there's a walkthrough method detector, there's a visitor management system. Okay, so all these will actually make it difficult for the attacker to come in. Okay, now the more measures you have, probably then your vulnerability score will be lower. But your measures are very little, or maybe even no measures, then the score will be very high. Okay, so let's look at, okay, so vulnerability can often be reduced through mitigation measures. Quite often we say let's implement security measures. When we implement security measures like putting in CCTV, deploying security manpower, typically we are reducing the scope of vulnerability. Okay, so this is how it's linked. Let's look at a few more examples of vulnerability. The effectiveness of security measures, the competencies, the physical design. Are there blind spots in the CCTV cameras? You know, CCTV cameras may not be 100%. Okay, there could be some blind spot here and there. That could be areas where the places where the attacker may come in. Okay, procedures. Is there emergency response procedures when something happens? Okay, system being maintained. Are there maintenance? Even simple things like fans, that there's hole in the fence is not being maintained. This create a vulnerability. Okay, attacker can easily enter into the compound. Okay, so let's look at consequences, impact. Now, this is talking about outcome, the severity of the outcome. If it's happened, how bad can it be? Okay. Key idea is that consequence usually remains high for certain scenarios, even with some controls. So, example, we quite often say bomb attack, whether car bomb or P-bike, personal bomb ID, they are low likelihood, high impact event. Okay, in many places, the likelihood of a bomb attack is low. Like example, in Singapore, the likelihood is actually very low. Like in the last, like easily 40, 50 years, there's really no bomb attack here. And so the likelihood is very low. Okay, but if it happen, the consequence is going to be very high. In most cases, unless there are really very good protective measures in place. Else, you will see property, structures, people, all will be affected. Okay, so therefore, generally, the consequence may remain high unless a lot of investment is a lot of investment. The organization is willing to invest in a lot of these protective measures. Okay. So these are some examples of factors you want to consider when you are scoring the consequences. As I mentioned, the most commonly used would be human life, okay, property damages. Now, others could be reputations, okay, business affected, okay, legal, okay, financial penalties by the authorities, or maybe contractual obligations with the customers. Okay, so common examples are like for the financial institutions. Okay, they have got strict requirements for security measures. Okay, so I hope that will give you some good ideas about this formula. Risk is equal to T times V times C. Okay, so I'm moving on to the last part already. Okay, I'm mindful of time. We still have about 10 minutes. Okay, so this is the last part. I will share with you a few TBI models. There are a lot of TBI models, but I just shared a few over here. Okay, let's jump in straight to the first one. Now, this is ASIS. ASIS. Okay, you might have heard about ASIS. ASIS. It is a non-profit security organization. You can actually go to the website at the bottom there. You can see a link. asisonline.org. Okay, they publish standards. Now, they have this risk assessment standard. The first standard was actually in 2015. They published this RA standard in 2015, but recently they updated it to the 2024. Okay, now, so you look at this model here, this risk assessment model here, it is actually reference to the ISO 31000. It looks very similar. Okay, the key RA process actually is in the center here. You can see the blue color box. There are actually three main steps: risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluations. Okay, so by following this process, uh, you can conduct your TVRA. So where is TVRA, the scoring? Okay, now if you are doing risk identification, you're actually looking at what are the critical assets, what are the types of risks, what are types of threats, what are the security measures. Okay, you're identifying all these things. Okay, now in risk analysis, what you are doing is actually you're doing all the scoring. Just now I was showing you the table where all the score is. 7, 8 is actually done here at the analysis. Then what is evaluation? Now, evaluation is to compare with a heat map. Okay, it is talking about your risk tolerance. It's like the example I share with you about the Alex, right? During the climb of Taipei 101. Okay, our tolerance and Alex tolerance is different. When we're looking at the same risk there, to Alex, yes, let's go ahead and climb. But to us, no, 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 no. Okay, our tolerance are different. Okay, we cannot accept the risk. Okay, so when we are faced with the same environment, the same threats, but our response may be different because our risk appetite and our risk tolerance are different. Okay, so this is where we talk about it, the risk evaluation. Now, from there, then we decide whether we want to treat the risk or not. The risk control comes in. Okay, so you may want to get a copy of this risk assessment standard by purchasing it from the ACES website, or if you are already a ACES member, I think you should take a look. Okay, it's a good resource. Now, the next model I want to share with you is this Center for Protective Security. Now, this refers to the Singapore Police Force. Okay, they have developed a 9-step model. Okay, so very quickly, let's look at the top. Okay, the top, the data gathering. That one is a step 1. Okay, they do a data gathering first. They find out what are the critical assets. Then they find what are the existing security measures. Okay, so when they identify what are the existing security measures, actually that's also when they can identify what the gaps are. Then they look at the threat categories and they develop threat scenarios. Okay, now threats categories itself may not be enough to help to do the scoring. It's important to get threat scenarios. Okay, then you look at scoring. You give the scoring like what we did just now. But I show you just now the scoring of 1 to 10, 1 to 5. Okay, you give a score, then you get the risk score. Now from there, you prioritize which one is the higher risk. You may have 5 risk event. Okay, then you see which one is the highest risk. Then you tackle the high risk. You design a mitigation measures for the highest risk. Okay, because we have limited resources, so we want to focus on the highest risk one. Then you do a re-evaluation. Now, re-evaluation is like what I did just now. Okay, the table, I have an inherent risk, and then what is the score after the risk control. Okay, so this refers to this step number 8, re-evaluation. And finally, you will have a risk management. Risk management here refers to the residual risk. Okay, because your risk likely to become 0, right? So what do you do with the remaining risk? It is a very detailed steps. Okay, they go into specific steps. They make it into 9 steps, but it is actually quite similar to some other RA model. Okay, example, the PIMA 452 model, although it's 5 steps, actually it is a bit similar, except the Singapore Police Force, they break it down into smaller steps to guide the stakeholders on how to go about doing the risk assessment. Okay, another useful model you can find is this. This is actually more of a origin for the safety, workplace safety and health in Singapore. I extracted a screenshot from the document called Code of Practice on WSH Risk Management. Now, this template has also been used for the purpose of terrorism scenarios also. Right? In Singapore, there are also requirements for them, for organizations who are this Peace Safe certified, to also address terrorist threats scenarios. Okay, so you can see it's similar. They have got these work activities, hazards, is like the threats. Okay, the existing risk control, the measures, what is the existing measures? Then there's a severity and likelihood. You notice there's a severity. Severity is just like the impact. The likelihood is like the threat likelihood. The RPN is the risk level. You may see how come the vulnerability is missing. Although they talk about risk control measures here, the risk control measures actually refer to the vulnerability. Okay, so they don't have an explicit column to put in the score. Now, the vulnerability risk control measures are directly considered, okay, when they give the score of the S and L. Okay, so this is how it works. Okay, so slightly different, but the concept are the same. Okay, you realize that, right? Now, in some of my modified template, I've used this template for some of my risk assessment before. I actually add in one more column on the vulnerability also, okay, because I want it to be very specific to address the vulnerability score. But if we are just sticking to the this template also works because it is more simplified. Okay, you got less number to fill in. Okay, so this is the last one I want to show you. Okay, this is a template which is 2005 is like a bit outdated, although it looks like very long. But frankly, my opinion, if you want to use this, still can, because it is a more straightforward 5-step model. Okay, it is really very similar to the formula risk is equal to T times V times C. You can see here. Step 1 is actually the threat likelihood. Step 2 is actually the impact consequence. Okay. Step 3 is actually the vulnerability. Okay. So when you do step 1, 2, 3, then you go to step 4, you get the score. You see how it works? It actually closely mapped to the formula. Okay. Then the step 5 is actually risk mitigation stuff. Okay. So this model also works. Although, as I said, this is very long ago, 2005 already, but you still can modify it. And in fact, I saw some authors, some people who wrote books, concepts, articles about risk assessment. They are still closely modeling after this 5 steps concept. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I have actually come to the end of today's session. Focus on 3 key areas: risk, what is the TVRA, and I shared with you a few TVRA models. I hope these are useful for you to make further research. Okay, you can go to those resources, okay, read up more about it. Now, for some of you, especially those who are based in Singapore, I know some of you are not based in Singapore. No worries. Maybe next time you got a chance, you can travel to Singapore. Okay, you can go to the website, Temasek Poly. I was saying I am a young lecturer with Temasek Polytechnic. Okay, you can go to the website. You can scan this QR code. Okay, scan this QR code. You go to this Temasek Polytechnic. You can see on the screen here. We run many different security-related courses. Okay, take the opportunity to travel to Singapore to attend a course, and then maybe you can do some holiday. Okay, enjoy yourself here. But for the rest, if you are based in Singapore, I think this is something more convenient for you. Okay, towards the end of this month, I'm running another program, implementing TVRA. Earlier I was sharing I run the essential earlier this month. So the key difference here is we will go into a bit more practical. I will cover concepts. We go into how to write up a TVR report. Okay, of course, we are writing a simple report, not the elaborate reports. Okay, we go through the process of writing a TVR report. I will also have this activity of a site survey. Okay, we talk about how to do a site survey. Earlier on, I talked about learning security measures. Now, one of the ways to help us to find out what are the existing security measures is through this approach, this method of a site survey. Site survey is to find out existing security measures and at the same time find out what are the vulnerabilities. So this is also something I will cover. Okay. Now, so for Singaporeans, PR, you're based locally, this course there's subsidy. You can see on the right hand side here. Okay, there are subsidy for you. You may want to leverage on all this subsidy to join the class. Okay, so that's it. Good night, everyone. Have a good weekend.